Hey guys, welcome to my first episode of my new show, IndieChoice Picks. Now, if you don't know what's going on with this show, basically every week I'm looking for new indie comics that are on Kickstarter, that are on Indiegogo, something that I would enjoy reading. Not only do I back those comics and those creators, I also invite them on for an interview to kind of pick their brain on what's going on with their comics, what got them into comics, and just to have them share to you what they do and how they do it and a little bit about their lifestyle. So today, our first interview goes to InZane Comics. The creator's name is Zane, and he created a phenomenal book named The Elemental Balance. Now, I've read issue one, and I am downright loving what he's concocted together. He's already run a Kickstarter and an Indiegogo. I think just an Indiegogo. He's running Indiegogo for issue number 2, issue number 3, and he's currently running one with issue number 4. Sorry, I had 3 fingers up. Issue number 4. So, guys, enjoy the interview. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. And if you guys have any questions for Zane, I'm going to post his social media contacts down below. And if you guys like what this guy is doing with his stories, please go back his Indiegogo campaign for the Elemental Balance, issue number 4, fired up, because I know I did, and you get a lot of perks with it too. So enjoy this interview. All right, we're live. So your name is Zane, right? Correct? Did I pronounce that right?
Correct. Yep.
All right. So Zane, thanks for coming on the show, dude. It's very exciting. This is like literally my first episode of doing this, and I love helping indie comic creators like you, because I know exactly how hard it is for people to be an indie comic creator, get all this work done, and then get it out to the people. And it's kind of a pain in the ass to get people to try and read your work, you know? So
Yeah.
tell the audience a little bit about yourself. How did you come across getting into comics? How long you've been doing it? Go ahead, man. The mic is yours.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
No
It's a
problem.
great pleasure. So the way I got into comics is, I mean, like a lot of people, I've always loved reading comics, and you know, just kind of, and some of the stuff that I've been watching in entertainment and whatnot, and I kind of noticed or started feeling like some of the quality started lacking, or some of the kind of things that I grew up with were
Mm-hmm.
missing. And it was one of those conversations, and I've written stories in the past, and there's like one thing led to another, it was a chain of events, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that if you want to see change, be the change you want to see. So
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of where I wanted to get into, at least entertainment, and the form of comic books was kind of like, that's where I love reading comic books, and I wrote stories, and I like that visual medium, and I love art. So all
Mm-hmm.
that kind of combined kind of made me want to get into making comic
Cool,
books,
cool.
basically.
So going back to what you said about stories and stuff like that, give me an example. Like, what would be like some stories that were you talking about comic books that you've read, or like TV shows that you've watched, or movies to where the quality isn't up to par? Because I've noticed that a lot of TV shows that I used to grow up with, like I'm a 90s kid, so I had a lot of old school TV shows, and I every time I'm sitting in a room with my fiance, we're just like, there's nothing on TV. We got Netflix, we got Hulu, we got Sling TV, we have all this stuff,
It goes on and on.
and
And
it's
now,
never anything good to watch.
each one of them are having their own, like Marvel has, Disney's going to have their own subscription.
Yeah.
DC has their own subscription. So it's like, an endless. So, okay, here's what I feel like, right? And this kind of, you know, I'll probably have criticism for, like, let me give one example, right?
Okay.
I personally loved Man of Steel, right?
Yeah, I loved it too. Great movie.
But I don't know, there was some negative feedback. Some people didn't like it. I felt like the studios got so reactive to try to please the people that didn't like it, opposed to focusing on the people who did like it,
Mm-hmm.
that that they started deteriorating it, and so it's almost like they lost their identity. As when you got to Justice League, it's like almost like you don't even recognize it compared to what
Oh, Justice
Man of
League.
Steel
And I
was.
was looking so forward to that movie. And
I really want to see the Zack Snyder version,
yeah,
I heard that Green Lantern was going to have an appearance in the Zack Snyder version.
really. Now that
Yeah,
would have been cool. That would have been
that would
cool.
be cool. See, and that's another thing that I have a problem with, and this was my criticism towards Batman versus Superman, was that in the trailer they showed all the main points, you know. So you go there, and this is what's entertainment's become, that they'll show you all the main stuff to get people to the movies, but then when you go there, you've kind of already pretty much seen everything, so you don't. It's almost
Yeah.
like when you go to a restaurant and they serve you your appetizer and dessert with your meal, you know, like
Mhm.
you kind of want to enjoy each one separately. I don't know if that makes
I
sense.
get that a lot too because okay, so like for example, in the new Avengers movie, Endgame, right? Like we have no idea what's going on with that movie. The whole plot, the whole premise, everything about it is just kept under wraps. And supposedly
Yes.
the preview that they've shown so far is only like the first 30 minutes of the movie. And I'm like, well,
Good.
we're literally going into this blind, and that's like the most exciting part.
I love that. I love that, you know, and I like that Marvel is doing that, you know,
Uh-huh.
because they're holding, you know, they're keeping things kind of secret, because I want to have, like, you know, what I said like earlier, with a trailer you should just be teased by it, right? You
Mhm.
should be, when you go to the movie theater, that's when you should like enjoy it, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, stuff like that. And then also, like, sometimes I feel like, I don't know, like for example, watching the TV show Supergirl, a lot of times I feel like Supergirl really shoves some kind of politics, you know, and it doesn't matter which side of the politics spectrum you are in, but I just feel like entertainment should be kind of
Entertainment.
set. Exactly, it should be, it
Exactly.
should be separate from that, you
You
know.
know,
That's my point of view.
it's funny you should say that because I've been saying that the longest time because when it comes down to it, man, everyone is just so divided these days. They're divided over everything, and the one thing that should bring people together should be, you know, a comic book, right? You know,
Exactly.
I'm also a writer. I write books. I've written 4 books in my lifetime, and over the course of trying to get an agent, you know what the agents are looking for? They're looking for, you know, more in the concept of more politically analyzed stuff. Like towards if
Yeah.
you have like a gay character in your book, or if you have someone who's more diverse, stuff like that. That's the stuff that they're looking for. But see, as a writer myself and as a comic book artist, I don't play on social politics. I refuse to play on social politics because it's
I'm
like,
the same way.
who are you catering to? I don't really understand. Like you're catering to a minority who wouldn't otherwise read your stuff, and you're just saying "f you" to all the people who have made it, you know, got you this far. I don't
And
like
to
that.
me, it's also deteriorating to diversity. I mean, in the spectrum of it, it might look like it's helping diversity because you're including these minority groups, but it's not, because what's happening is you're deteriorating opportunities from minority writers to write their perspective on those characters.
Hmm.
And to give an example, is I'm not against any, you know, diverse characters being added. Like for example, when let's talk about, like, let's say if there's gay characters, right?
Yeah.
Some places gay characters work really well, like Game of Thrones and Sense8. Perfect. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, it just goes so great. And it's partially maybe because some of the directors and the creators are gay, and they have that sympathy and empathy in this. I feel like my personal belief is that if you're a writer, you need to be obsessed with what you're writing. You need to
Hmm.
be extremely passionate about what you're writing. Just because you don't write about a certain thing doesn't mean you're against it. You
Hmm.
should focus on where your strengths are and where that is, and not based on what you think editors are going to buy or what people are going to buy. Like, you write good stories.
And
That's where your focus should be.
I heard a quote, and I live by this quote. It said, "Write the story you want to write, not what you feel other people want you to write."
Exactly.
It's 100% like solid. Like I remember I read an article about George Lucas, and when he was writing his prequel trilogy, Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3, that Jar Jar was going to be the big bad, and Jar Jar wasn't received very well, as you must know, but he was literally talked out of making Jar Jar the big bad Sith Lord. And I always thought about like, what would happen if George Lucas just said, "F it, I'm going to make this. I'm going to make Jar Jar the most badass Sith Lord ever." Like with Star Wars, would those prequel movies be like as hated as they are today, or would they be a little bit more, you know, fun and enjoyable? You know, like I think about that stuff because I get, you know, you want to write the story that you feel that people are going to want to read, which is 100%. You want to write something that's going to be appealing to, you know, people. But if you have an idea and you have a story that you want to write, in my opinion, you should go ahead and write it. And if people like it, great. If people don't like it, great. You know, at least you got out there and tried. But there's always a niche of people out there who, for some reason, they like mermaid vampires for some reason. I have no clue, but that's a niche. I actually came across a Kickstarter with mermaid vampires. I was like, that's a pretty catchy concept. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have thought about that, but you know, the
Yeah.
thing is smashing it right now. So that's those little things like that. I like in this day and age, creativity is the key, and I think the more creative you get, the more success you're going to have with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the way I see it is that you should, if people like what you were writing before, you should just trust that they would continue, liking
Hmm.
your free thought, because that's kind of where I think people, you know, would drive towards, not just, because when you start catering to what people want, then that becomes more predictable in a
Yeah.
sense with
Hmm.
these stories. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things we can go around and around over, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Like,
just,
I gotta ask, what did you think about Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and what do you think about the trailer of Episode 9 that launched yesterday? What are your thoughts?
I actually haven't watched it, and you're gonna get me criticized for it. I actually haven't watched it. I've been kind of running around doing some other stuff, but yeah, I know there's a lot of like kind of back and forth on it. I kind of quit watching like the Star Wars movies and stuff,
Hmm.
but that's just that's just me.
See, a
But
lot of people just would detested The Last Jedi, and at first I wasn't really like against it, and then I started seeing all the stuff about the movie that didn't need to be in the movie. And, you know, I'm just going to say that all franchises have a hiccup. I actually did a video on it today. All franchises have a hiccup. Just a hiccup. There's no call to say, I'm done with Star Wars. I'm out of here. No, just
uh,
let it play out and see what happens. So,
you
okay,
know,
go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna mention one other thing. There's this other like, kind of like this political type move was on Captain Marvel. You've probably seen, groups just kind of.
Oh,
I,
look at that
you
movie.
know, I actually kind of liked it,
I liked
but
it too.
it's just I didn't like what Brie Larson said, but other than that, I kind of liked it. I'm not
I
gonna be ashamed to say it.
like
You know,
when Brie Larson said all that stuff about white men and all that stuff, it was kind of like a turnoff because when I first saw the Captain Marvel trailer when she was flying through space and fighting all the Kree, I was like, that looks dope. Like I can't wait for
yeah.
this movie. And then 180 turns around and she says that stuff, and I'm like, kind of don't want to see the movie anymore. But I'm the
Yeah,
guy that I love the MCU so much to where I don't care what movie is going, I'm going to go
yeah,
see it. Movie
yeah.
was great. Not a fan of Brie Larson, but I set that aside for 2 hours and 3 minutes and
Yeah.
just enjoyed the movie.
I was just looking at it as from a character standpoint and movie standpoint. I try to ignore all that, but that's to say that I'm not biased.
Yeah.
Like I'm not. I just go with an open mind.
And I'm
when it
all
comes.
for a female superhero, but I mean, they're
Yeah,
making it seem like that she's the first superhero who's a female. I'm like, are you kidding? There's the chick from
Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman, right? Tomb Raider. You got all these women who just kick ass in movies, and everybody
Absolutely.
just kind of like forgot about Scarlet Witch and I mean, not Scarlet Witch, Black Widow and Scarlett Johansson. And I'm like, she's not.
Yeah,
She may be the first powered superhero in the MCU, but there's been dozens of other
yeah.
female leads. So okay, so enough with that. But I want to kind of get into your work really quick. I'm gonna share the screen really quick so we can show the audience. So can you see my screen?
Yeah. Oh no,
Cool.
not yet. It's loading. Okay, I can see it.
All
Yeah.
right. So I have to say that me and my fiance, we read your comic. I loved it. She loved it. And I just have to say, like, as I was going through it, the first page, um, it, the way you talk about how the earth is formed and how this energy and, conservation of mass. I'm an engineer and I went to school for physics and all that fun stuff. And when I see stuff that talks about like, primal energies and stuff like that, it really gets me. Like you really had me in a hook. You got to let me know how did you come up with this concept?
Well, uh, as far as the science is concerned and all that, I am a big nerd when it comes to, or I love learning about history and science. I like watch these documentaries on Netflix. It's just, I just get really fascinated by it.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of the story actually came from a conspiracy that I read online, and I don't even know how I got to that, but it was It was the conspiracy had to do with saying something, government's hiding information, yada yada yada. But then it got into like an example, and one of them was, you know, the states of matter. And they
Uh-huh.
say, you know how there are 4 states of matter: solid, liquid, you know, gas, and plasma. And
Yes.
then said if you notice it, they sound very similar to the 4 elements, the ancient concepts of the 4 elements. And
Okay.
so it was interesting that they were comparing, you know, because like liquid, water, you know, solid, earth, you know how that goes,
Yeah, yeah. Makes
gas.
sense too. Yeah.
But so anyways, you know, just kind of like listening to that concept, you know, one thing kind of led to another. Oh, like what if we're being deceived? And you know, it kind of led to all these different ideas that I kind of put into you know, a paper, and then started developing a story out of that. So it came from just some kind of conspiracy about what we know, what we think. And so as you read this story, you'll notice it has a very familiar kind of structure to it, as like the way the story progresses.
Uh-huh.
And also it's going to have a unfamiliar tone when you start getting later on into the story, unfamiliar concepts as you start getting later into the story. We're going to take the elements. The 4 elements are basically an excuse. They're not, although it seems like it's the primary premise of the story, it's more of an excuse, because the question that I challenge in this story is, we understand matter, right? We understand things that we can see physically,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's concepts that where we can't see, right? Like, for example, personality or decision or, you know, intuition. These are things that we don't understand and how they are relevant to matter. And so if you think about it, if every single one of us are made from the same carbon components or whatever, all the same elements,
Yeah.
then why is it that we're all so different? So I challenge that question in the story.
That's interesting. That's
So so elements become the symbolism of matter, basically, to put it short. And then we're going to start noticing something else in there that are not tangible. And by the way, what I'm mentioning is not like apparent. It's not like you're going to read this and what I just verbatim said is going to be written there. It's just influenced or infused into the story, if that makes
okay.
sense.
So there was a concept, I believe, it was later on this page where and it's Chloe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chloe is talking to the scientist, and the scientist is talking about the conservation of energy. Like energy can't be created nor destroyed; it can only be transferred. So later on, we meet the guy who apparently has the Earth power, and he's able to like shift rocks and stuff like that. Can you explain a little bit more about what bodies are transferring the energies into these people? Is it literally like the Earth, like how this guy got stuck in a mudslide and he came out alive with the powers, or did he already have the powers? Can you go a little bit more in depth with that?
I
Or is it a
wish.
twist that?
Yeah, it's gonna be. I'll mention. It will be brought up. Let me
Okay.
put it that way. The audience will get to know at the very end, actually, of the story.
I
But
mean,
it's gonna be left at almost like you got the answer, but you're not fully satisfied, because it'll leave room to grow from that, because you've got the basic answer, but then you kind of almost wonder you understood the how, but now you want to find out the why, which
mhm.
gives us more room to develop the story even further.
Fantastic. Okay. So are you going to go further? Like, what are your future plans? I see you've done the Earth, which everyone can go on Tapas and read for free. You
Mm-hmm.
did Kickstarter for 2, which is water, right? Or yeah, it's water, and then 3 would be air,
Mm-hmm.
and then the 4th one is fire. Now, are you going to go beyond those 4 elements and try maybe pick at the periodic table, or what are future plans for this story? Can you give me a little bit? Because I'm excited.
Oh
A little bit.
man. Let me put it this way, okay? Everything you touched on, I've considered.
Okay.
So, I don't know how to say anything until I'll tell you this. When you read chapter 3, you'll get some of the answers
Okay.
you're talking about. Chapter 5 is going to have the bulk of those answers. And so this series is going to be a 6-comic series. It's basically a mini series.
Okay.
And so I'll have a conclusion and when it ends, it's going to leave it at kind of like almost not a very hard cliffhanger to where you're annoyed that, oh my God, I don't know when the next, you know how a lot of movies come up with something and it's like, you feel like, you know, they did that on purpose to get this in second issue or the second series. So it's not going to be like that. You'll be satisfied with the ending. It'll have a conclusion, but we'll leave some gap for next series. But most of what you mentioned is kind of brought in, and it actually is more of a refreshed way of looking at it. So we'll talk about the periodic table, you know, and I think there's hints of it given in the first chapter. And in fact, when you start
I saw that
reading,
where he has a periodic table right here, and I was like, huh, you know, elements. Because when I was in chemistry class and my chemistry teacher asked me, well, what's an element? I said exactly what the book would suggest, you know, earth, wind, fire, earth, wind, water, air, stuff like that. I'd never considered the periodic table to be kind of like, you know, the whole elements, which is
spectrum of the elements.
The universe. Yeah, you know, so that was kind of my idea. It's kind of like the little cell right here. It's a little bit like an Easter egg, if you want to say it like that. You know,
you know, I call it foreshadowing. You
okay.
know, gives you the hint, gets you prepared. You know, and if you think about it, right, like the periodic table is like the modern version of the elements, more, you know, talked about, and the rest is kind of classical. You know, the 4 elements are classical.
Mm-hmm.
And then so those things are kind of, you know, brought in, will be brought up back again. And then, you know, I'm excited to see how people are going to receive it, like the way that I, you know, imagined it, the way I thought of it in the story. You know, I'm really curious to see. And, you know, the biggest thing that, and the most crucial element to this, you know, but the most crucial thing that I was thinking about this story is when the audience or when the readers get to read, what does the title elemental balance mean? And that's explained. It will be explained. And so that's going to be very interesting, because I'm taking a lot of risks when I'm making this story. But the way I see it is, if I'm gonna write a standard story, why should I write it? Like, I want to take those risks.
Mm-hmm.
So I can just hope that people will receive it well. You know,
I'm excited for it. Like I completely love the concept that you use here, and I going back to like other shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender, you know, shows that use those fundamentals of the elements. It's kind of like you melded, you know, science with fantasy a little bit, and I like how people do that, because like I fact check everything when I'm writing my comics. I make sure that if I'm going to drop some knowledge, like the knowledge has to be somewhat, you know, accurate. You can't just be like, oh, well, you know, it's fiction. Don't worry about it. Because, like, for example, The Flash. I love The Flash. Whenever he travels back in time and does stuff, I'm like, okay, well, you know, there's going to be repercussions. And sometimes the show kind of glosses over that. And I'm like, that's not okay. You kind of have to have the physics work right in order for the show to make somewhat of a sense. Like, I get the whole, you know, the Speed Force, stuff like that. You time travel. You go back in time and you meddle with stuff, you come back and everything's the same. That doesn't make sense in the sense of, you know, physics, you know?
Yeah, and I have my own thought on that, right?
Go for it.
I think the reason why people feel disconnected is like, and this is why in my story I use real facts and then I steer away and go into the realm of fiction. Because if you can ground your story in somewhat reality, you'll get the people more hooked. You'll make them feel something more practical about it. You know, I mean, the reader is reading it knowing that it's fiction. You know, they're not expecting everything to be factual, but at least the writer has to do their due diligence in making it kind of be well grounded. I think the better word is relatable. You know, and that goes along with for characters and story plot. You know, make it relatable, make it to where somebody could say potentially this could happen. You know, like this could be a potential. You know,
that's like when I watched Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey. I was listening to Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I love the guy. I love his podcast, and he was telling me that was probably one of the most accurate astrophysics movies he's ever watched. And I go, that's pretty cool. You know, we don't know that for sure, because most of the astrophysics theories that are out there are purely theoretical, because, you know, we don't have a warp drive. We can't go to other galaxies and experience that. But the theories that the movie kind of took from and kind of implemented to say, okay, so if this theory says this, how can we implement that into the movie? That's cool.
Yeah,
And
I think the co-writer in there was actually a scientist from NASA, I believe.
yeah. He was. He was a NASA scientist who was brought in to consult on the movie. So I mean, you got that kind of concept, and then you kind of have Avengers with the Infinity Stones, which is still cosmic. These things were brought out during the Big Bang. Like, that's purely fiction. And that's what I was kind of thinking about when you did your comic. Like, these elemental energies were created during the Earth, the formation, not so much as a Big Bang, but as the Earth was forming, which kind of grounds it to like, this is, I want to say I won't say limited to Earth, but all this started when the Earth was created in a sense, not the entire like universe. Because as I'm writing my stuff, I'm starting to branch out more into like the universe, and I got to go back and like, well, let me see what that theory says real quick so I can be accurate on my facts. I don't want to
Yeah.
upset like someone who's in the field and they're like, well, this doesn't make sense. You can't do this because da 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 is wrong, blah blah blah. And I could just be like, oh, it's a book. I don't like doing that. I want my facts to be spot on, and I'm starting to see that with a lot of writers too. They want, if they're going into like a I guess a sciencey kind of concept for their book, they are bringing in consultants who are familiar with the topic to kind of lend a helping hand on that, and I think it's pretty cool.
I did too. And I want to mention one thing though too. I think for writers out there, I don't necessarily say that they have to put science into it if it's not something that they cared so much about. I think they should focus on something that they're very passionate about. I can see from your background, you're passionate about science. I'm just passionate about it just because I like the information. But some people might be more passionate about fantasy,
Yeah.
and more power to them. Go for it. Go for making things that that are not that steer away from that a little bit. So but be passionate about it.
Yeah,
just have
most
that
definitely.
drive.
Like when it comes down to fantasy, you kind of get your wider range of, if you're going to create a concept, you have the freedom to kind of go out of the realm of reality and kind of create.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then I know a lot of people, and I see it all over Twitter, where you get these writers who are coming up with concepts, and the concepts to them make sense, but then they scrap the concept because it might not make sense to the reader. And it goes back to writing what you want to write, not as opposed to what the audience wants to read just yet. If the people read your work and they like it, great. If they don't, then obviously they're not a part of your audience. Because even Harry Potter, if you go back, there are a shit ton of plot holes in Harry Potter. Like, I'm not even joking. And that's that's the world's best selling book series of all time. And I went back and I read the books and I go, wait, no, Harry can't do that because he did this in the book. It's like, I don't think J.K. Rowling was too worried about people coming up with plot holes of her book, but there's just so many plot holes. So I guess that's my message to all the creators out there, is just, if you're going to write something, write it. Don't worry about people plugging it apart and being like, well, that's a plot hole. That doesn't make sense,
Yeah, it'll always happen. You always have. I mean, with my book, I've had my own share of criticism, and I think it just kind of comes with the territory, I guess.
It does. Now, one question about the story. I still need to back your Indiegogo for number 4. I got to get on that because I'm really excited for what you're doing. Is there a big bad? Is there a big bad villain in this book? In this story? Now,
yes. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I'm curious what you're going to ask, because
I was going to say, when are they scheduled to make an appearance? And is the character, like, I wouldn't say a Thanos kind of threat, but is the character threatening in a sense, like, these guys, their lives are in stake, more or less?
Okay, so yes, actually the character comes in chapter 4.
Okay.
And so you get to meet the character, and the villain is really rooted into the title, Elemental Balance, and essentially to the story. The character is kind of, and I like that you said Thanos, because it is a little bit close to what Thanos is, because the thing that made Thanos really a good villain, or scary villain, in my opinion, is because he's not a villain like, and this is the kind of villains that they used to happen, and that, we steered away from it, where those villains would be like, I want to take over the world, or I want to destroy the world. Why do you want to destroy the world? Because I want to destroy it. Or I
Yeah.
want to take over the world because I want to take over. You never know why they want to do it.
They
Right?
just want to
And
do it.
so they just want to do it. So to me, or there's a villain who does it for money. Like, I want to rob a bank. To me, those characters are not very scary, because they don't have a rooted motivation. They, someone who's doing it for money, somebody else pays them more, they'll back off, or at some point they'll feel like it's not worth it. At least in my way of seeing it. So I'm not that afraid of, or invested in that kind of villain. But like someone like Thanos, who generally, and actually Thanos makes it more scary, because Thanos thinks that what he's doing is right.
Yeah.
So not only is he's a villain, but he's motivated in it from a moral standpoint. He thinks it's his moral duty, because he can, almost what a hero would do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's almost a hero in his own world, in his own sense. And so that's what my villain's like, is a hero in the character's own mind.
I got you.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, because I think a lot of writers, and it goes for both DC and Marvel too, and it goes back to throwing politics into it. A lot of people they're coming up with these concepts for characters, for superheroes, or just for character in general, but they're not really focusing on the story of what makes them who. And when it comes down to like characters with superheroes and stuff like that, to me, my bread and butter, and I've been told this, is backstories. I go real deep into backstories about characters and why they are the way they are. And I don't just stop at the heroes or the protagonists. I go deep into the antagonists too, because there's a whole story in there. You want to kind of make the character interesting. If you just keep on creating a character that's just like, oh, I want to take over the world, blah, 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 and blow it up for no reason at all, just to do it because you can, it doesn't really scream to me diversity, because that's been done before so many times. Giving a character a solid foundation, and settling it with the story of why this character is like this. Even if they come off as that, I'm the kind of guy that would write the character first, or draw the character first, give him a blank slate, have him do some devious things, and kind of backtrack and ask myself, okay, well, why is he like this? This is
exactly.
That's how I do all my stories.
Like, it was funny, because when we left like the theater of watching Thanos or Avengers, my wife was like, I kind of can see from Thanos' standpoint, like, she left it, and she's not a big comic book person, right? She will come and watch all the movies with me, but so it's kind of funny that she left there saying that I can see, you don't agree with the point, but you can see it, and you can be like, all right, I understand from your standpoint. And that's a multidimensional character, that's a in-depth character. And making of, and I don't know if there was a shift or what point in time that shift happened, but I think audiences have become more invested into the villains as well as being a big part of the story.
Yeah, like Killmonger, he was a good villain in Black Panther. He's fantastic.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
There are very few enemies in the MCU who are worth remembering. Like, Thanos kind of set the bar, and anything less than that. The Skrulls and Captain Marvel were pretty deep too. They kind of went into their backstory a bit, so there was a little bit of development there. But I mean, thinking back right now in the MCU, Bucky Barnes was cool when he was a Winter Soldier. Yep. That was a good arc. I can't really think about in
Iron Man 2. What was the villain's name? I thought he had an interesting.
Well, yeah, Ivan Vanko, Whiplash, who was also the Crimson Dynamo. So they fused the two together. Yeah. He had an interesting backstory, but I felt that they could have gone deeper into it.
Yeah,
a little bit more, gave him a little bit more of a deep, his hatred was deep seated. But for what we got from the character in the first 5-10 minutes of the movie, it didn't explain why it was deep seated. We could have got a little.
We just kind of brushed over it.
Yeah. So, but as the MCU has been growing, you've been seeing a lot more well-developed villains, and I think that's what Marvel should mostly invest in. Like I said, we don't know what Endgame is going to be when it comes out. We have no clue what it is, and I love that concept. But I mean, are they going to introduce another villain on top of Thanos? If so, are they going to go in depth with that? Because like I said, Thanos set the bar. So if you're going to rush in with Galactus or somebody, you got to come swinging, because Thanos is just sitting there like, yo, what's this guy's story? Mine's is better, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Oh, great.
but yeah, man, I really liked your concept, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. I don't want to make this too long because I got to go through and edit it, but um, I really do appreciate you guys, you coming on and speaking to me. Real quick before we go, can you give me a little bit more in depth on your team and everyone who's involved with your project? And is this the team that's going to be working on the entire story going forward, or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, so I'm the writer, and I do majority of the lettering in my comic. I do
Okay.
have another person named Davison Maines who helps out with some of the sound effects and some of the lettering.
Okay.
But I like to keep most. I like to do most of them myself, just because it's a learning experience for me. And then the artwork is done by Luke Horseman,
Okay.
and so he's he's done all the art, ink, and coloring for chapter 1 through 3. And in chapter 4, I did have a colorist that was helping out, but then you know how this business works is that there's not much money for artists here, so he actually had to end up getting a corporate job. And
Uh,
so then Luke came back in and helped out, and Luke did a pretty good job. You know, hopefully when you read chapter 4, you won't notice that transition in a colorist. Um, but it is what it is. And so Luke's been kind of the main guy to do most of the artwork. And then I have Amy who helped out with the editing, and then there's another guy named Jeremy who helps out just kind of looking at it and just kind of seeing the content. So
okay.
great team.
Fantastic. Well, it looks great to me. I'm looking excited. I'm really excited to getting part 2 and 3 in the mail, and I'm gonna go on Indiegogo sometime this weekend and back your 4th one and keep it going. So, again, thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. Is there a particular date you want to have this out or anything like that, or you just want me to edit it and just get it out there?
Whenever you want, you know. And you already brushed on it. You already mentioned it, and I just kind of want to re-mention that we do have an Indiegogo for chapters 1 through 4, and the last day to get that is on by the end of the month.
Okay.
So I encourage people to support this project. This is how I can continue making content, is by support. And so really want to finish this series and get it out there. I think it has a lot of potential.
Okay. Do you have a website where people can go and visit?
Yeah, so you can go to www.inzanecomics.com, or you can find me on any social media site just by typing InZane, INZANE Comics.
I like that play on your name too. That's pretty clever.
Thanks.
All right, buddy. So thanks so much for tuning in. I will get this up and tag you in and everything like that. We can get the whole thing going. So you were the first. So congratulations on that, man.
Yes, appreciate it.
All right, man. You have a great night, and thanks again for all your work, man.
Definitely. Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Well, there goes our first interview. I'm glad you guys tuned in. I hope you guys had a lot of fun. We tried to squeeze it into a little over under 30 minutes, but when it comes to talking about these things, well, we just get carried away. So if you guys want to see more of InZane Comics work, you can check out his first issue, The Elemental Balance, on TAPAS, and I will post a link below. So you can follow that. You can read it on your mobile phone, tablet, computer, whatever. And if you're interested in getting a printed copy of that issue, go check out his Indiegogo campaign for his 4th issue, Fired Up, and check out some of the perks that he has. So I'll be uploading more interviews every Wednesdays and Sundays. And coming up this Sunday will be another interview with another creator. So please, guys, if you like this segment, subscribe, please share with your friends, because I feel that the indie comic creator community needs as much love as we can get. So please subscribe, tell all your friends about it, and I hope to see you guys there on Sunday, where I will be giving you another interview with another fantastic creator. So you guys have a good evening, and I will check you later. Bye.